Now, the topic for today, before we begin, hold on there, Mr. Brandon. I'll give you a signal. The reason I'm addressing, usually where we're jumping into this topic today, is this is a follow-up on something that I spoke of during the festival.
Good.
I was a little surprised at the feedback that I got on this particular point. It wasn't really what I expected, but because there were a number of people who had further questions or comments and were willing to discuss this, I just felt it might be worthy of more time. So today, we're going to be moving into an area that is something that, at first glance, you might think, well, there's not an awful lot to it, but on further investigation, there really is. And I think it's an enormous value, so I'm ready to start getting to use the topic. I would like to start the CD. The topic today is entitled The Value of Biblical Meditation.
Good.
The value of biblical meditation. Now, that's not a particularly exciting topic. However, I hope to emphasize the value. I don't have a colorful title for this Bible lesson, but I do want to try to emphasize the central importance of it. Some of us are practitioners of biblical meditation and we don't even know it.
Amen.
Others among us probably are not, and we don't know it, and we are not aware of its importance,
Yes.
and its central importance.
Amen.
So I'd like to emphasize it today. Let me begin with a story. Many of you may recall that during World War II, the Japanese had gradually accumulated several 100,000 Allied prisoners of war. Many of them were American, many British. The Japanese policy was to take all their POWs and place them into work camps. Many of them were working in mines, others were working in different things. But each work camp was designed to extract maximum labor out of the POWs with minimum investment into them, as absolutely cheaply as possible, get maximum labor from them. And so essentially the work camps, they fed them, they were essentially on a starvation diet, and they probably received, they estimate, somewhere between 800 and 1,000 calories per day. And each man was required to work at hard labor somewhere between 14 and 18 hours per day. So it was an utterly miserable, an unimaginably miserable experience. Now that starvation diet meant that there was a daily deficit of probably 1,500 to 2,000 calories every single day. So men that entered those camps weighing 160 or 170 pounds, if they were fortunate enough to survive to the conclusion of the war 2 or 3 years later, were reduced to weights, a heavy weight would have been 100 pounds. Many of the survivors were 90, 85, truly walking skeletons. Now this didn't bother the Japanese at all, because their attitude was we want to extract as much labor out of them as possible before they perish. That was their policy. Now this slow starvation, as we understand, and is quite obvious, is an extraordinary stress on the body. And all of us recognize that that's a horrible situation. What I'd like to share with you is the thought that just as food is the fuel that keeps your physical body going, and if you have a demanding physical life, perhaps you're a carpenter or something, and you're going to need fuel every day. You can't work a 14-hour hard labor day if you're a young and healthy man, and work all day hard labor with your only working on 1,000 calories, 1,500 calories. You're going to consume, you're going to gradually, you're going to shrink down. Now you might like that for a while. It might be great for a period of weeks or so, but obviously as a long-term ongoing plan, it's a catastrophe.
Amen.
Now that's what happens, though, in our spiritual lives.
Yes.
In our spiritual lives, we do the same thing. We place ourselves on starvation diet.
Amen.
We're not aware of it. We're not aware that our spiritual man is on a starvation diet, and then we expect that for our spiritual life to go well and smoothly and make great spiritual decisions in life, to make great moral decisions in life, to be able to make great decisions when we have a balancing act of different ethics and values and struggles, and you scratch your head and you say to yourself, what's the right thing to do, and how do I sort all this out? And we don't have any spiritual fuel that's been feeding us. Amen. And so we're like some sort of POW starveling. Amen. Trying to struggle with an enormous spiritual or moral burden. We've given ourselves no fuel to do it. Very good. And let me give you another analogy to emphasize the importance of meditation. Because meditation, and I hope to show you from Scripture, meditation, biblical meditation, that's important now. Biblical meditation is our spiritual fuel. It is the fuel that we have to have in order to have a prosperous and healthy spiritual life, which then spills into all the other aspects of our life and our decision making, day by day, week by week, month by month. As the years go by, our spiritual life is what generates the decisions we make through living. But here's another analogy, which is different. And of course, every analogy is an approximation of truth. It's not an identical truth. But imagine you're an athlete. Now, we all know that athletes in many, many sports are dealing with something called muscle memory. So take basketball, a sport I'm familiar with. Basketball is a very fast-moving game. Prepare for the fast-moving game in which you have split-second decisions. You have a tenth of a second to make a decision, or even less. You have to make a decision that is more or less instinctive to be good at basketball. It involves all this muscle memory, so it involves a great deal of training beforehand. Well, that training beforehand, because you've seen that situation on the basketball court 1,000 times before, you instinctively have a sense of what's the right way to respond. Because you spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on the court, in practice games, in practice sessions, with a skilled coach who's placing you in these situations so you'll know what to do without thinking. Amen. You instinctively just respond. And meditation works that way in our spiritual life. It provides muscle memory, so to speak, sort of a spiritual muscle memory, so that when we're faced with a given situation in life, we really don't have to think about what the right thing to do is, because we instinctively, through biblical meditation, are pre-trained, we're pre-prepared. We have sort of this spiritual muscle memory in which we just react, and we're going to react correctly. We're going to react wisely, because we have fed ourselves in the spiritual man. And without feeding our spiritual man through biblical meditation, then we're not going to be able to respond well. Which is why when you place a rookie on the basketball court who's watched the game 100 times, he's got 100 hours of watching, he has 0 hours of playing. He's going to get pulverized instantly by the man who's got many, many hours of training and inbred instincts. So, those are just two ways of trying to get your mind thinking. Now, let me just begin by recapping a few of the passages that I looked at the last festival. Don't bother opening up your Bible. Just listen to the verses I'm going to read, okay? And later on, I'll ask you to open up your Bible. But for right now, just listen. Some of these verses are going to be familiar to you, and they are essentially exhortations for meditation. And we hear about Bible reading, the importance of that. And I certainly don't want to diminish that. We hear about prayer, and I don't want to diminish that. It turns out that Bible reading and prayer, they are related and somewhat integrated into the idea of biblical meditation, but they're not exactly the same. If you are a person who regularly reads the Bible, you're going to, without even trying, spend some time in biblical meditation. If you're a person who prays, you're going to end up spending some time in biblical meditation, most likely. But they're not really identical. And that's why the Bible uses this particular word. And and it associates the word meditation with a number of enormous blessings. Let's begin in Joshua chapter 1, verse 8. I'm just going to read a series of verses. Joshua 1:8 reads, "This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success." Now another passage which is very, very familiar, and for a good reason, a very wonderful passage, is found in Psalm chapter 1. May I read the first 3 verses of this well-known chapter? "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper." May I continue in the book of Psalms, chapter 63. Psalm 63, 5 and 6. "My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips. When I remember thee upon my bed, and meditate on thee in the night watches." Psalm chapter 77, verses 11 and 12. "I will remember the works of the Lord. Surely I will remember thy wonders of old. I will meditate also of all thy work, and talk of thy doings." Psalm 119, verse number 97. "Oh, how I love thy law! It is my meditation all the day." In the New Testament, there are citations. I'll read one for you. 1 Timothy, chapter number 4, and verse number 15. "Meditate upon these things. Give thyself wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear unto all." All right, let me pause now and give you a sense of what biblical meditation really is. All right, first of all, it really is thinking, it's reflecting, it's contemplating, it is to muse, consider, it is to sift ideas. Meditating, however, is not daydreaming. It is not aimless thoughts that are just running through your mind. In fact, there are some cautions in the Bible about vain imaginations and the dangers of just letting your thoughts sort of just ramble. What if I win the lottery? And instead of just thinking about it for a minute or two, you sit down, you spend 45 minutes thinking about what you're going to do with $1 million. And you say, well, there's no harm in that. Well, there might be a little bit of harm in that. But there's certainly going to be harm when we let our thoughts just ramble about all sorts of things. And people don't necessarily just accidentally drift into sins like adultery. Amen. These decisions are based on our habits and the thoughts we think. Amen. And if we're going to be successful in our personal lives and live a personal life of virtue, morality, honor, biblical understanding, our thoughts have to also be brought under dominion. Amen. And so there's danger in just letting our thoughts just run aimlessly. That's not what biblical meditation is. Biblical meditation is bringing some measure of focus to our thoughts. It is a thought life of reflecting, thinking, musing, contemplating, sorting and sifting ideas. But it's not doing it in just endless whiling away the hours, daydreaming, with your thoughts just running any which direction they seem to want to take you. Now, also what biblical meditation is not. It has nothing really to do with Eastern meditation. And then there's a little bit of that's percolating into our society now. You see ads on TV, trying to get you to buy this or that. You see somebody standing there going like this, buy our, whatever it is, all this goofy stuff. Look, all that Eastern meditation is really very much kind of a contradistinction to biblical meditation. In Eastern meditation, they want you to empty your mind. They really do. They want your mind to be empty. In Eastern meditation, they want you to seek divinity within yourself. In Eastern meditation, it's sort of, they argue that it's an altered state of consciousness. We don't want an altered state of consciousness, really. We want biblical consciousness. We want to be biblically conscious, not some empty, altered state of consciousness going to be filled by who knows what kind of evil spirit.
Amen.
Who knows what kind of temptation. So it's not this biblical meditation has not anything to do with this Eastern metaphysical flim-flam. Now, as we continue to explore a little bit about what it is and how to go about it, let me give you a few practical aspects. What biblical meditation is the word ruminate. And I articulated this earlier at the festival. But the word ruminate is what cattle do. What bovines do. They eat grass, they swallow it, and it sits in their stomach for a while. Then later on, when they have some leisure time, they spit it back up, and they chew on it again. Now, the Hebrew word for the English word meditate takes us to this idea of ruminate. And that's essentially what biblical meditation is. It's taking in biblical information. Biblical information. That is, you're reading God's thoughts from the Word of God. You bring them in. You put them in your mind. And later, when you have a little bit of leisure time, you bring them back forward again. They take them from the back of your file cabinet, and you put them back in the front of your file cabinet, and you chew on it a little bit more. That's what biblical meditation is. It's ruminating. Now, there's lots of different strategies that people employ. Now, it's quite obvious to me, and I believe it's foundational to understand, that you can't ruminate, you can't meditate on something that you haven't previously eaten. A cow can't ruminate. She can't spit up grass and chew on it at her leisure, if she didn't eat the grass in the first place.
Amen.
That's why Bible reading is so critical. It's absolutely essential. It's foundational. But Bible reading alone isn't really enough to bring the blessings of meditation. Amen. Now, if you do read the Bible a lot, you're going to end up thinking about it some of you
Amen.
time.
Amen.
Whether you want to or not, you're
True.
going to do some biblical meditation. Just because you've
Amen.
got a lot of Bible information in your head. But we got to understand that information is not, by itself, is not everything that we need. Many of the poor decisions that we make in life isn't for lack of information. It's not that they don't know better. So what is it? They know better. I knew better. But I made a poor choice anyway. So what's going on? Well, this is why the Bible describes meditation as having all these wonderful virtues, which we'll look at here a little closer in a few minutes. All right, so you've got to read the Bible. But how do you do it? Let me just give you an illustration. And I'm doing this because I have had 3 or 4 different people ask me a few questions, so I thought, well, this might be worthwhile taking just a few minutes of time. So turn with me to Psalm chapter 91. Psalm chapter 91. Now, this is a passage that I think is very familiar to many of us. But let's see if we can distinguish between reading and meditating on a passage that's already familiar. So just open up to Psalm 91. We'll take just a couple moments. We'll move on quickly. So let's just take verse number 1. This is going to be our example. Many of us may even have this memorized. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. All right, well, we know more or less what that means. But meditation is when you take that verse and you begin to break it down word by word and reflect upon the individual meaning of the words and then how those individual words relate to one another and try to derive some meaning and wisdom that wasn't immediately obvious with a casual reading. And you say, well, that sounds like Bible study. Well, I guess it is, but you don't have to be a scholar. We've got the Bible here for us, and the scholars have done all the hard work for us. Amen. We don't need to pull out a stack of concordances and study Hebrew. We don't have to be a Hebrew scholar. Just reflect on the individual meaning of the words. It might take a little bit of developing your mind and building your vocabulary. But, for example, when we look at this passage, we have a sense of the word dwell. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High. Now break it down. What does the word dwell mean? What is the secret place? The secret place. What does that mean? Is there only one secret place? Is there multiple secret places? Do I have a secret place? What does God mean? Is it the secret place? What does that mean? Why is it secret? The Most High. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High. Now look at that phrase and look at the second phrase. It says, he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Now, in a very general sense, the first phrase means more or less the same as the second phrase. Is this, however, mere redundancy? Or is there shades of understanding and meaning that might be of value there? For example, does the word abide mean exactly the same thing as dwell, or is that something different? Or when you run into that word abide, and you think, wait, where have I heard that word before? You might say, oh, wait a minute. Jesus used the word abide a whole bunch in that chapter in the New Testament. Wasn't it John 15? He that abideth in me, and I in him. And it goes on and on using the word abide. Does the word abide mean dwell? Does dwell mean live? I dwell in a house. Is abiding with Christ the same as living in a house? Is it like living in a house? Do you see what I'm driving at, ladies and gentlemen? Where we're taking the verse and we are ruminating. We're taking it apart piece by piece, not with a giant fat dictionary, but just thinking about it. Do you follow what I'm saying? Now, I have no objection, and you're going to be blessed if you decide you do want to look up the words in Hebrew. Fine. Or get yourself a nice, good dictionary and say, well, the word abide isn't used in our common English language today, so I'll get an old English dictionary that takes me back to the King James era. And I'll find out when the translators selected the word abide, which was used in those days very commonly, what did they mean when they selected the English word abide? Since we don't use it very much anymore. So yeah, if you want to be a teacher, and a scholar, and a researcher, that's great. And that would probably fall into this general area of meditation. But meditation really isn't about scholarship. It's about taking and deriving meaning that's personalized. Amen. What does it mean for me to abide under the shadow of the Almighty? The shadow of the Almighty? Why does it say shadow of the Almighty? Why does it just say to abide under the Almighty? Why the shadow of the Almighty? Is it mere poetry just for the sake of fluffy words? Or is there something further? Well, I'm not here to provide answers on this particular verse. I'm just trying to point out that this is what meditation is. And deriving extra meaning out of this particular verse or any of these other verses is going to be of great value to you. Now, another thought that's important. It really doesn't matter, this is my opinion though. I don't know that it matters a great deal what passage you choose to meditate on, what verse you meditate on, you're going to get value out of it. Amen. In fact, it's better for you to pick a verse that just seems to resonate with you than to take a verse that I would advise. A verse that resonates with you is going to be easy for you to remember and memorize. And really, in some respects, memorization is an important part of meditation. You can't really do a lot of meditating on a verse while you're driving down the road or you're doing something else if you haven't already got it in your head. Amen. But it's not hard to remember a verse if that verse is already speaking to you. Yeah. It's easy to remember. So pick a verse, pick a passage, pick something that resonates, that seems relevant to you at this moment. Anything, anywhere in this whole big book called the Bible. And then ruminate, meditate. think on it, reflect on it, take it apart, put it back together, weigh it this way, weigh it that way. Maybe it's bring another verse that you weigh this way and that way. It's similar. This is what meditation is. Now, one of the things that's also essential in meditation is a quiet spot. It's because meditating is as much listening to God as it is speaking. And we understand that prayer is when we speak to God and we let Him know what we're thinking and how we're feeling and the concerns and the things that we have. Prayer is also praising God and lifting Him up and bringing recognition of who He is. But meditation is more of the reverse. It's more of the listening to God. Amen. It's letting the Holy Spirit work at you. Now, as Protestants, we're not comfortable with this. Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, and other branches of Christianity are much more comfortable with this. To us, this seems kind of hocus pocus, fuzzy new, squishy stuff. What is this meditation stuff? Well, we've lost something.
Yes.
Unfortunately, and I'm not about to run off and join up with those folks. I'm very much a Protestant. And my inclinations are very much Protestants. But as Protestants, we tend to look at everything in sort of an intellectual way. And when we intellectualize something, that's great, and that's of enormous value. But that's not the only thing that is of value in a Christian life. And so we can't just run purely on our intellect. We have to feed the Spirit as well. And that's what meditating does. And so actually some of in Eastern Christianity, they do emphasize the value of this sort of thing. And that's why they emphasize the idea of this quietness, this stillness. And it has to be alone. So you